Aloha, welcome to the FFF Show. I'm Jim Hochberg. This is my last in-studio show with Eva, and she said it was going to be fun, but now that I've gotten here, I think it's a roast. But anyway, pass it to you.
Yep, Jim and I are going to say goodbye, but not forever goodbye, but we're going to chat about some memories that he's going to be surprised to see and some of you may not know about. So let's chat about that.
And let me ask you a question. Am I going to be on the show at all after this? Do we know?
People will just have to stay tuned.
Oh, okay. All right.
All right. So what we are going to do on this show today, Jim, is I had fun. As Jim knows this about me. Some of you may know this about me. Some of you may not. Is I love to research things.
Because you can't sleep.
Because I can't sleep, or because I have one of those minds where something will pop into my head, and then I'm like, wait, where does that come from? Like, I'll tell you one of the things, something you may not know about me. I love to find out where sayings came from. So when somebody says something like, well, nothing goes over the devil's back that don't scratch it, I like to look it up and see where did this come from? Or words. I like to see
How did you do it before Google was available?
Encyclopedias. I loved going to the libraries. I talked about that in one show, about how much I love the smell of books and all that. So anyway, I love to research things. So what I did, Jim Hochberg, is I went on to newspapers.com.
Never heard of it.
I did. That's where you can see newspapers all the way back. I want to say 1800s, but it may even go back before that. So if you do a search and a location, you just find how this person was mentioned in the newspapers.
Oh boy.
And so I wanted to see the articles that mentioned Jim Hochberg. So let's go.
Wait, before you get into that. And I had a friend. I think he's still in Honolulu, but I haven't seen him in a while. Lawyer friend, who, when I was in the press as a conservative voice on whatever, and I'd run into him in downtown walking around, he'd say, Jim, saw you on TV again. You know, opinions are like rectums. Everybody has one. Doesn't mean we want to know. But he'd say it with a smile on.
And I know you like to pick on Alan Cardenas. He always says the opinions are like diapers.
Yep.
They need to be changed off it.
Go ahead.
All right. So let's go back to the early 1990s, because I mean there were some
I've
that
been
was
making
earlier.
trouble a long time.
You have been, and so, but I wanted to find articles that were specific to some of the work that you've done. Some things I'm familiar with. So all of these articles are going to. So when we get to the article, I want to get your opinion. Oh my gosh, I remember that. Or what was that?
All right.
So
I told you it was a roast.
So let's go to the first article, which was September 29th, 1993. Rutherford Institute resists labeling. And we've got a very young picture of Jim Hochberg.
See how much I look like Scott McQuilcany back then?
Yeah. So tell us what this is about.
I don't know. I don't remember this. So
okay.
What is the religious right? Who wrote it? Was staff Tom Kaiser?
So I can read a portion and maybe this will. It says, in Hawaii, it unsuccessfully fought the dismantling of a huge illuminated cross at Camp Smith in 1989, which military leaders concluded might violate the separation of church and state. And it fought a proposed bill in the legislature that would have prohibited employment discrimination on the base of sexual orientation.
We talked about that last week.
We did. And then it's interesting because it says, a churchgoer and father of four, Hochberg feels students and teachers in public schools should be allowed to pray if they want to, even though a U.S. Supreme Court ruling last year prohibited prayer in public schools.
Well, compulsory prayer.
Compulsory prayer.
I think, and actually subsequent cases out of the Supreme Court said Coach Kennedy actually can pray at the 50-yard line. I was right back then.
And that's why I pulled this article, because, again, I wanted to show people that it's been years that you've been doing these kind of things. And in spite of the fact that your hair is dark there.
It was way thicker, too.
Way thicker. It's interesting.
And I hadn't had my that laser cert thing, LASIK.
Yeah, so you actually have some funky. It looks like 1970s glasses in the 90s. I don't know, Jim. It's pretty good. All right, well, let's move on to the. Oh, and that was the Honolulu Advertiser article.
September 29th, 1993. Wow.
Yep. Okay, next, what do we have? Honolulu Advertiser, October 1st, 1993. And judge ends ban on DOE posters for Teen Line. And this
was also a Rutherford Institute
was
case.
a Rutherford Institute's case. So tell us about this one, Jim.
So I got labeled by the editorial board. If you found the editorial where they talk about me in this. So this case had to do with the run of the gamut of the social service nonprofits in Hawaii put together enough money to buy a computer pre-programmed with telephonic messages from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, Wisconsin. Very, very liberal school. And they wanted to bring it to Hawaii so that it was called the Teen Line, and you could call a phone number to get into the computer and pick a number for the message you were interested in knowing information about, and then you would hear the message.
I remember Teen Line.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I got called by a mother of like 37 kids in public school. So she was like, we talked about last time, the perfect client, because that's a lot of years of school before the case, because the case has to end at the Supreme Court while you still have a plaintiff. She didn't really have 37 kids, but she had a lot of kids. Anyway, and she had been talking to one of her kids about it, an elementary school kid that had the card, and she called, and it was really bad stuff. Like, is anal sex okay so you don't get pregnant? And then the message is, oh, yes, engage in anal sex. There's zero risk of pregnancy. I mean, it's like, what parent would want that message out of these social service agencies? But the reason that it was challengeable in court is they were using the DOE and the private schools to market this thing from kindergarten through 12th grade.
Oh my gosh, flashes of Pono, remember?
Exactly.
So
Pono
again,
Choices was a retread.
Exactly.
And so I filed a lawsuit. So here's what, so this was back when, what is that restaurant that was in the corner of McCully and Kalakaua? And anyway, I forget. Anyway, this big fun restaurant with about rock and roll guitars and all that stuff. The kickoff of the Teen Line was going to be at Hard Rock Cafe, and they invited public school participation based on being a counselor in the public schools, being a student body officer in the public schools. They weren't being invited as citizens. They were being invited because of the public school status position that they had. And so I sued, asking the federal judge to enjoin the public school invitees from going because they were there because of the status as being a person that was had status at the public school. And the court granted my motion for injunction to keep the public school out. And the private schools could do the thing. So they went and they had their little thing, but it all fizzled out because it couldn't be in the public school. It was a terrible kickoff. The case went on, and the editorial board of the paper, when they reported their editorial opinion, called me a telephone terrorist by name. So anyway, the case actually settled. My clients were willing to permit the business card size information to be on a desk in the counselor's office only in the high school. So they were pretty reasonable. They said, we don't want posters on the walls, and we don't want kids to be able to just get them out of any teacher, any administrative person. And it couldn't be in the elementary schools or the middle schools. It could be in the high school, and it could be in the counselor's office was the only place you could get these cards. So the thing pretty much fizzled out. But they had really bad messages like, what if I don't want to go to church with my parents anymore? Oh, well, you don't have to go to church. Blah, blah, blah. And so Dallas Willard, who was a professor of philosophy at USC, University of Southern California, was my expert witness. He wrote a book called Spirit of the Disciplines. Highly recommend Dallas Willard, Spirit of the Disciplines. And he served as my expert witness, and his testimony was that this form of counseling, which has no give and take between live questioner and live counselor, it's called non-directed counseling. It's terrible because counseling needs to be interactive. So anyway, that's how we won that one.
That's so good. I love this. Okay. What's our next memory lane?
We're going to have to do a 4-hour show.
No, we're going to end. We're going to end on time. And so those that are listening on the radio, if we end abruptly for you, you're going to have to go to YouTube to see the rest. All right. So this is December 8th, 1995, Hawaii Tribune Herald. Bum, 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 bum.
Oh my goodness. 95.
Yeah, it says, okay. So this
was the Governor's Commission on Sexual Orientation and the Law.
Now, this is where...
So let's put it in context, because content plus context equals meaning.
Yes.
So in 1993, there was a lawsuit in the state of Hawaii court over whether not letting same-sex couples have marriage licenses violated their constitutional rights. This was before the amendment 5 years later.
This was the time period where I met you.
And so there was a trial, and Judge Kevin Chang ruled that the Attorney General's defending the marriage statute prohibiting same-sex couples lost, which led to the legislature in 94 putting this commission together. And Father Mark Alexander was on it, Fritz Rolfing was on it, and they were supposed to look at sexual orientation and the law, what should happen with the same-sex marriage issue. But that commission was appointed based on Father Mark being a priest in the Catholic diocese, Fritz Rolfing being a bishop in the LDS Church, and the Constitution of the United States, unfortunately, has a clause that says there can be no religious test to hold public office. And so I don't remember who sued, but somebody challenged it, probably Mitch Kale. I don't know. And so it got terminated because it violated, you can't have people appointed to government positions based on their religion. And so then in 95, the legislature appointed another commission. And Speaker Suki asked me to be on it. And then the president of the Senate asked somebody, and the governor asked somebody.
So again, how many people were total were on the committee?
There were 7 people. Who was my
Tony Sheldon.
Tony Sheldon was a lawyer, and I was a lawyer, both Christian lawyers, against 5 liberals that wanted to have same-sex marriage as the recommendation out of the commission. So it was like every vote that happened, we lost 5-2.
I know, but I have to read. Okay, I have to read this one part of this because, and then you can continue on the story. It says about 21 people testified in favor to the report. Despite the larger number of people opposing the report, lawmakers will still be receiving the report and support same-sex marriage and domestic partnership. Now, is that not ringing the gong of you and I talk about this all the time? They don't care.
No,
they
don't.
do what, and this is 1995. This is going back 20 plus years that the legislature still
Almost
does.
30.
They continue to do whatever they are going to do.
And in this thing, what the commission did was hold public hearings and have people come in and testify. And the 5-member majority from the very beginning, without hearing any testimony, had declared that it was just like Loving versus Virginia, which did not allow interracial marriage. But it didn't allow interracial marriage because it's in Virginia, and it was back in, I don't know, 59 or 60, whatever. That was a race thing. This was same-sex people having a marriage. So it wasn't discriminating. It was like saying, yes, you do want to drive an 18-wheeler, but you don't qualify for the license because it's for not you two.
And can I just build on what you said in the last show, which I had to laugh because in the last show you talked about the sexual orientation stuff in business practices.
In the employment. Yeah.
And you said during the testimonies they kept going up, going, no. We don't want anything else. We just want to be fair in the business. Now
we just don't want to lose our job.
And now fast forward to here. No. We don't want to go into the schools. We don't want to change education systems. We just want the ability to get married.
We just want to love who we want to love,
Yeah.
And so we had the 5-2, the 5 majorities. They had determined from the very beginning that it was no different than Loving versus Virginia, which outlawed interracial marriage. And the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that as unconstitutional. So that was their foundation going from the very first minute. And so the process was a government commission, which meant we had to keep minutes. We had to approve the minutes before we could do the next meeting and that kind of a thing. And so on the first day, there were all the news channels had their cameras there and everything. And I had been way back then, before Mike Gabbard was a politician. He was still Tulsi's dad, but he hadn't gone into politics. He had a show on like Olelo or something, a TV show.
He also had a restaurant.
Correct. And so in his TV show, I was on it a lot because we always were talking about this kind of legal stuff. And I got to know John, whose last name I don't remember, who was the cameraman. And so I called John and I said, hey, do you have the time and the willingness for free to come and record every one of these meetings? And he said, sure. So he was one of the guys that was there the first day with KHON and whatever, but he came every time. And after the first one, he was the only one there. And nobody ever asked him who he was or why he was there. I don't know. So I had this guy videotaping every minute of every meeting for me. And so I also would ask who's coming next time. And when they told me that this professor, a business professor, was going to come and testify next week about the economic benefit to Hawaii from tourism and all this stuff of having same-sex marriage, I happened to have a friend at Western Washington University, was the chancellor of graduate research because he retired from UH. He had this guy's job before this guy, and he knew him really well. So I called Moheb Ghali.
Your expert witnesses always are like top notch,
of course,
Jim.
You got to get the good ones.
I'm just saying.
Otherwise, you lose.
And can I also say, under full transparency, I was working for Mark Alexander at the time. So because he got booted off the commission, what he said is he ordered me to go to all the. So I was there with your cameraman, and I just remember being there so much, to be overwhelmed at the amount of testimonies. A lot of people had never done that before. Never. People, and I remember you and Tony would be sitting there at the table with all these other guys. They would be like whispering to each other, passing notes and all that. And you and Tony were really trying to listen and take notes based on the thing. So I'm just saying, I was there. I saw it myself. And you're only touching the surface of the shenanigans that went on
So
during
at the very beginning, I made a motion that we would permit expert testimony from over the phone because there wasn't Zoom and stuff like that back then. 5-2, they said, no, you have to come in person. So I knew that already by the time we got to the professor at business school at UH. So I asked for the draft of the testimony so that I could prepare. And I sent it to Moheb Ghali at Western Washington University. And I said, tell me what you think. So he called me back. He said, this is bull. This is impossible it's speculation. It has no foundation in economics whatsoever. And I said, would you like to come in person to testify? They won't let anybody testify long distance. He goes, sure. I said, okay, let me see if I can raise some money for a ticket.
The old travel to Hawaii that's really hard.
He had a house, and he probably still does in Manoa.
Yeah.
And so I think Terry Bosker paid for it or something, I think. So I got a ticket for him to come, and he came. And he and I intentionally entered the room a little bit tardy so that his professor would already be there. And this was so cool. So the professor's there thinking he's going to be the champion for this new thing. And in I walk with Moheb. And when he sees Moheb, he goes, and Moheb walked up to him and said, hi, I forget the guy's name, Professor so-and-so. He's still doing stuff now. And the UH professor looks at him and says, are you testifying today? And he blew him out of the water. They never did another minute of that meeting or any of the other meetings. So they didn't want the minutes of that interaction of the testimony. So we went through to the end, and they gave a draft of the commission's report, 5-2. They got what they wanted. And so Tony and I wrote a minority report to make the majority report completely ineffective, because we wrote how every bad thing that they did that was a violation of the purpose of the commission, and not letting people testify long distance, and and not doing minutes, because their report, the draft of the final report, cited minutes they never produced.
And so whatever happened to all of this video, or it wasn't video, the film recording that you did back then?
So we get near the end, and they have their report that cites minutes that had never been shared with me anyway. And I'm in the room, and I say, you can write whatever you want in here, but that guy who's videotaping, he's been here the whole time, every minute, for me. So you can say whatever you want, but the truth is on his tapes. And so at the time, oh gosh, who was the lawyer that did the same-sex marriage thing and later went on to the Intermediate Court of Appeals under Abercrombie? Anyway.
Yes, I know.
So this commission's report was supposed to support his appellate stuff with the same-sex marriage case. Foley.
Yes. Yes.
And he came up to me on the sidewalk. Dan Foley.
Yes.
And the thing about the lawyers in Hawaii, mostly we're collegial, even if we are on completely opposite sides of political stuff. Lawyers they don't take it as personally as just regular clients do on political stuff. And I bumped into him by First Hawaiian Bank when our minority report came out and the political community was trying to deal with what they were going to do. He said, I was supposed to use that report in my case, and you totally destroyed it. I can't. Thanks. Which is what we did. Anyway, that's this story.
That cracks me up.
Oh, but you have to tell your favorite recollection of that local guy that testified.
I am not good at, because that is a little raunchy for YouTube, and I think. But let me just say this, that people were honest, people were raw. And like I said, because people had never done it before, people would get up and they would testify their heart, because no matter what people say, I was there at those hearings. It was never an attack on the homosexual person. No. It was never an attack.
It was all about what is a marriage.
People, even like the simple farmer, or the person, the old grandma Tutu, they were like, this, what are you doing? They just saw this was an attack on the very institution of marriage. And people were horrified, again, going back to what they said in here, that there was so much opposition to same-sex marriage at the time. And no matter how the other side wants to paint it, it was never an attack on people personal. People were fighting for marriage because they truly believed that, and they still do today, that children are best served when they have a woman and a man married, committed.
Biologically, their parents.
Yes.
And in fact, in 2013, when Abercrombie required the legislature to do the special session because they did not pass same-sex marriage in 2013, there were 10,000 people protesting at the legislature against having same-sex marriage.
And that was an effort that Hawaii Family Forum was behind that. We worked with a lot of different leaders in the community to get those thousands of people there. There was a big argument at the time, remember, on how many people were there. Some people were saying, oh, there were less than 2,000. And then there's some people saying that there were over 10,000. The point is that people were really, they were so blown away that marriage was going to be redefined. Because I remember the USCCB at the time, this was way back when, they said,
2013. They
said, ultimately what's going to happen is marriage is going to include everything and mean nothing. And that's again, and this is the reason, one of the reasons I wanted to do the show, not only to just go back to Jim Hochberg memory lane, but to show people that the reason we've stayed so long to do all this is because of the interconnectedness of all these issues. And we've also noticed that the same people who were fighting against us on this issue back then are still the same ones that come out for abortion. They come out, for the attack on assisted suicide,
stuff.
The attack on the educational system. So it's like the same circle of people.
Correct.
So we've been around a long time. All right. Well, let's move on to the next thing. All right, this is March 29, 1996,
what
Honolulu
was I doing in
Star
96?
Bulletin.
I don't know.
This was a article that Jim himself wrote
With Marie Sheldon.
with Tony Sheldon. So this is, again, it's...
this came out of the Minority Report.
Right. So this was, but I like this. So this was a year later, though, that what they did is they took your Minority Report and they did this article. So I know that some of the listeners might be going, this Minority Report, the report of just the two members that were the minority, what did it say? Well, this article was, it was written by you. So you guys did a good job of kind of bringing up a summary of what you talked about. I still have that wired bound pink.
Yeah, it was really funny too. So our report gets a pink binder, and I ask the staff person that was assigned to the commission from the AG's office, I forget her name. She was a nice lady. Anyway, why did you pick pink? Because it's, a gay issue, same-sex marriage issue? She goes, no, that was the only color we hadn't used yet.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
Okay, but so without going too much into detail, you want to at least talk about the headlines that you have there?
Well, yeah, because I don't remember it. Real versus perceived benefits. What did we say? Objective evaluation of major legal and economic benefits of same-sex marriage can only receive through state-sanctioned marriage and an actual, I don't remember this. I really don't. Destruction of the family unit, means to the end, social purpose of marriage.
Meant to an end, family. And
means,
then
means to an end, family.
Yes, and then social purposes.
So Dr. Sokorides back then was doing the reparative therapy, and now it's been outlawed. It's been outlawed.
Oh my gosh! Again, we hate to keep doing this, but again, all these issues, they connect at some point, and so it's like, so you can have people that are passionate about these issues that step up and go, we got to fight this. But sometimes it's good to have the historical context, right? You talked about that, right? The context is really important. And so for those of us that have been around the block a few times, we see how all of this they continue to attack.